Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, dear students, today we are going to start a new topic, and the name of the topic is shear stresses in thin-walled members or thin-walled section. So, specifically, actually, we are discussing this topic with reference to steel section, where the thickness of wall element is very small as compared to the length. For example, the thickness of the flange is very small as compared to the width of the flange, and similarly, the thickness of web is very small as compared to height of the web. So normally, what type of the element they may be considered as a thin-walled element. So you will find different definitions in different books. But generally, if the thickness is less than 1/10 of the length of the element, then that element can be regarded as a thin-walled element. So why we are studying the shear stresses in thin-walled sections and how their behavior is different from the conventional rectangular beam section where the thickness is also comparable with the depth. So we will study in detail. So actually there are two types of the stresses which are produced in any beam section. So first are the shear collector stresses or the bending stress, and the second are shear stresses. And both they are present at the same time. Maybe at one time you may have only maybe the shear stress or maybe the bending stress. So actually, whenever a beam is subjected to a transversal loading, so first of all, we need to clear up the definition of the beam. So beam is a line element which is subjected to transversal loading. So when a line element is subjected to transversal loading, so there are two types of internal forces produced within the beam. One is called the bending moment, and second internal force is called the shear force. And what we do, we are interested to determine the maximum bending moment produced within the beam and maximum shear force produced within the beam. So if your basic concepts are not strong, so you can plot the shear force diagram and bending moment diagram just to determine the section where the bending moment and shear force they are maximum. And maybe now, until now in the sixth semester, you can directly know that maybe at what point the shear stresses and the bending moment will be maximum. For example, in case of simply supported beam, subjected to maybe UDL load and center point load, the bending moment will be maximum in the center. And in case of the cantilever beam, the bending moment is always maximum at fixed force. And similarly, the shear force is always maximum at this force. So it means that the Fletcher stresses due to the bending moment, they can be determined by using the Fletcher equation. And similarly, the shear stresses due to the shear force which is produced within the beam can be determined by using this formula that you have already derived in your basic mechanics course. So shear stresses which act perpendicular to the longitudinal axis of the member and that are a directly function of the shear force. And shear force B is the sum of all vertical components of external loading on either side of the beam section. So I believe that I don't need to discuss this definition in detail. So actually, we may have two type of the failure in any beam. Beam may either fail due to the shear forces or maybe due to the flexure stresses. Flexure stresses actually they are the combination of compressive stresses and tensile stresses. When a beam is subjected to bending, so one side of neutral axis is subjected to tensile stresses and other side is subjected to compressive stresses. And due to the shear force, the sliding may take place within the beam section, so the failure will be the shear failure. So at the moment, I want to tell you one thing that all type of the material they have only three type of the strength. They may have compressive strength, they may have shear strength, they may have tensile strength. So it means that when a beam is subjected to transversal loading, so all three type of these stresses are produced within the beam. So tensile and compressive stresses they are produced due to the bending moment, and the shear stresses they are produced due to the shear force acting at any particular section. So we need to check that whether a beam is strong in shear. If a beam is strong in shear, it means that it may either fail due to the tensile bending stresses or compressive bending stress. Or in other words, if a beam is very strong, it is having high compressive and tensile strength, then it may fail due to the shear stresses, and due to the shear, the sliding may occur. So you can assume that we are having a beam section which is comprised of different layers. So when we apply the load in transverse direction, so you know that the horizontal shear stresses they are acting between any layer. So these shear stresses, if they are more than the shear strength between the layers, so they will cause the sliding. And you have already discussed that the shear stresses they are maximum in center, they are zero at extreme fiber. This means that if a beam will fail in shear, so the plane section will not be the main plane. The assumption that we have considered for the derivation of Flagler formula will become invalid, because that formula is only applicable if beam is subjected to pure bending. So if the shear force is zero, then the sliding will be uniform in all fibers, or none of the fibers will slide. So this section will be the main plane. But here you can see that due to the sliding of the individual fiber, so the surface is not even or not plane, and this is uneven. So plane section will be not the main plane. So you can assume that you are having register maybe with you, your copy notebook. If you are bending it, you can see that all the pages they are sliding with reference to each other. Why they are sliding? Because the page they are not glued to each other. They are not tied, because there is no resistance available, shear resistance. So if there will be any shear force produced, so this shear force will cause the sliding of the fiber. But on the other hand, you can assume that if you staple the register all pages, or you can maybe tie all the fiber. So in this way, by riveting or bolting, you can say in this plan, rivet or bolt, it will resist the sliding of the fiber. This means that the shear strength will increase. So also the flagell strength will also increase, because a beam can only carry the bending stresses if it is strong in shear. So it means that both are interlinked with each other. So I will not discuss the derivation of the shear formula in detail, but I will discuss certain assumptions that we consider for the derivation. And because later on we need to discuss this assumption, because some of the assumptions they are not 100% correct. So in derivation of the shear formula that you have already discussed in mechanics of material classes, so you consider some important assumptions which are enlisted here. Material is homogeneous and all stresses are within the elastic range. So material is perfectly homogeneous and all the stresses are applied within elastic range or within the yield strength, yield stress. Shear stresses are uniformly distributed over the entire cross section. So over the entire width of cross section. So we will discuss this assumption in particular in detail also. Actually, you have already discussed shear stresses, they are varying along the depth and parabolically. They are maximum along the neutral axis and they are zero maybe at extreme fiber. But along the width, the stress is uniform. If the neutral axis at this part is subjected to 100 megapascals, along the width the stress will be remain 100. But this assumption is not 100% correct. We shall discuss in detail. The formula is being derived for rectangular cross section, but it may also be applied to any other cross section with a plane of symmetry to calculate approximate value of shear stress. Actually, this formula gives accurate value maybe for the rectangular section, but if the shape is changed, for example, the circular shape or any other shape, then the formula cannot predict the accurate value. Why? We shall also discuss this. So just I will quickly pass it. For example, if you are having any beam section which is subjected to any arbitrary loading, maybe any loading, so it is having the cross section width B and it is having total height h. So distance from the neutral axis to the stream fiber is h by 2. And for example, if you are considering any small differential area on this cross section, whose value is equal to dA. So y is the distance from the center of this area to the neutral axis. And y bar, you can see that y1 maybe it is the any variable distance to the layer, maybe any variable layer where we want to determine shear stress. So similarly, as in flexure formula derivation, we have considered two sections very close to each other, maybe section 1 and section 2, and the distance between the two sections is referred as a dz, very small. Movement, if you plot the bending moment diagram, movement on the one side of this differential area is m1 and movement on the other side is equal to m2. Similarly, if you plot the shear force diagram, so shear force on the one side is referred as a V and on the other side it can be regarded as a V2. So this is the distribution of flexure stresses because m1 is more than m2 on the other side. So the flexure stresses on the one side, their distribution will be like this. One side will be in tension and other side will be in compression. So if the moment on one side of the section is m, so the moment on the other side will be equal to m plus delta m. Delta means rate of change of movement within this section. If you add this change of the movement to this movement, you will have total movement here. So dm may be negative or it may be positive. So we want to consider a particular layer here, maybe this y1 which is having distance, and we want to determine total shear force or shear stresses between this layer. What are the shear force or shear stresses acting between this top section and this bottom section at this particular layer? So it means that we can assume the section to be cut from here. You can either consider the bottom part or top part for the determination of the shear force or shear stresses here. So if I want to consider the top part, so I need to consider only the stress diagram which is acting on the top part of the layer. So we know this sigma 1, this may be the compressive stresses which are acting due to the movement m on this left side of the section or differential area, and sigma 2, they are the stresses due to the acting due to the movement m2 which are acting on the right side. So we need to convert this stress into force because we want to use the equilibrium equation. So this F1, actually this will be equal to this stress multiplied by the area, this length and the lateral width of the cross section. If we multiply this average stress on the area over which they are acting, so we may get F1. Similarly, sigma 2 multiplied by the area, which is this depth and the width of the cross section, will be F2. And dz is the width of two cross section, distance between two cross section, which is dz along the length. So F2 will be more than F1, we are assuming. Why F2 will be more than F1? Because we are assuming that movement at section 2 or on the right side is more than M1. It means that if the area is same, then sigma 2 is more than sigma 1. So F2, which is equal to sigma 2 over the cross section area, will be more than F1. So it means that just to balance this, it means that there is unbalancing force, this F2. F2 is more than F1. Just to balance this, we must have a resisting force acting between this layer or at the bottom part of this section, which will be dF. We can say that that is differential force which is acting at the bottom. So this df force, actually this will be equal to shear stresses multiplied by this dz and the lateral width of the cross section. Width of the cross section, this one, because stress is acting on this area, this this depth and this width on the cross section. They are perpendicular to the cross section. So if we want to apply the equilibrium equation, summation of all forces in Z is equal to 0, then dF will be equal to F2 minus F1. Or you can say F1 plus dF should be equal to F2, because F2 is more than F1, so we must have a balancing force dF. So dF is equal to F2 minus F1. So F2 force actually we have determined by the flexure stresses, sigma into dA. So if sigma 2 is multiplied by the area, dA differential area, if you can consider only this area, if you integrate this area over this width, then you will have this total area, which is equal to h by 2 minus y1 will be this width multiplied by this b, that is total area over which this force is acting. But we are representing into integral form. If we integrate this differential area over the width h by 2 minus y1, then that will be this area. So y1 to h by 2. Similarly, F1 force is equal to stress at section 1 into area, and we are integrating it. So sigma, actually this equal to my over I, because this stresses we are computing from the flexure stresses. So sigma 2 is equal to m2 y over iz. So actually this is supposed to be ix, because cross section they are rotating about x-axis. Cross sectional axes are the x-axis. So because sigma 2 are the stresses which are acting at section 2, we can say that this one. So sigma 1 will be m1 y over I at any layer, because we want to determine the stresses at any variable layer. That may be y1 here. So from here, we can take this parameter as a constant, y into dA. So m2 minus m1 over ix, they are constant that can be taken outside. So this is y into dA. And similarly, this dF force, that will be equal to, because this is acting on this area dz, and then this lateral width b. So because this is acting between the layers, so width multiplied by this thickness of this differential area. So that is dz. So dF force is equal to shear stresses which is acting within the layer multiplied by the area. So m2 minus m between m2 and m1. So that is the change of the m2 minus m1. So what does it mean? This means that if m2 and m1 they are same, then there will be no shear force acting. M2 and M1, if they are same, so this parameter will be 0. So dm will be equal to 0. This means that there will be no shear force or shear stress acting between the layers, which is true for the case of pure bending moment. Pure bending moment, you might remember in mechanics of material, you perform a bending test on a wooden beam. So you created a region in the center which was the pure bending. Pure bending moment means that the moment was constant within the central zone. So if you consider any two cross section between central zone, so rate of change of bending moment is 0. So it means that if the rate of change of bending moment is 0, then that section is subjected to 0 shear force. So that is also true from here. So M2 minus M1 is dm. So shear stresses, again this value is not changed. I will correct it. So we have changed it. So by this definition, this is the first moment of area. And if we are bringing the B and dz to this side, so that will become shear stresses dm over dz. So what is this dm? This is rate of change of bending moment with reference to length. So rate of change of bending moment, that is equal to shear force. So dm over dz can be replaced by b. We have replaced here b, and b will be remain same, and I is the moment of inertia about x-axis, and this is the definition of first moment of area or static moment of area above the layer or below the layer, y into dA. So that is if A prime is the partial area is this area, this blue, and Y is the centroid of this area with reference to neutral axis. So this way we have derived this formula. So in this formula, I don't need to explain. B is the shear force at any particular cross section where you want to determine shear stresses. Maybe if you want to determine the shear stresses here, so that is the shear force acting at section M2. Q is the static moment of area or first moment of area of partial area either above the layer or below the layer where we want to determine shear stresses. Ix is the moment of inertia about the axis about which the bending is takes place, and B is the width of cross section. So which is given all values they are described here. Okay, next, for a very thin walled section. So in thin walled section, actually the distribution of shear force, shear stress, they can be considered maybe constant along the thickness direction. And we can only represent distribution of shear stress along the length of the flange or length of web or along the web direction. So in that case, actually, sometimes we use another concept which is regarded as a shear flow. So what is shear flow? If we multiply the shear stresses which are acting on any cross section with the thickness of the layer or the B, then what are the units of shear stress? Newton per millimeter square. Then if we are multiplying with the B, so the units become Newton per millimeter, or that will be equal to force acting per unit length. So actually for a thin wall section, we are more interested in force acting per unit length rather the force acting per unit area, because the thickness is very small. So we can assume that the shear stresses they are uniform along thickness, and the force or the shear stresses they are only varying along the length of maybe element which is the web. So this is called the shear flow. If shear stress is multiplied with the thickness or the width, a quantity Q is known as a shear flow is obtained. So shear flow, it represents the shear force acting per unit length, which is transmitted across the cross section at any level, any layer. So you might remember that in our plate girder chapters in steel structure, in order to design the weld, we computed the shear flow, force acting per unit length. How much force is acting along the length of the web between web and flange junction. Why? Because we assume that along the thickness direction, the shear force or shear stress they are constant. So it is only varying along the length. So that's why we always use the concept of shear flow in case of thin wall sections. Actually, shear flow, this definition will only be considered for thin wall section like steel section and where the thickness is very small. We cannot consider it for a section where the thickness is significant or comparable. Why? Because actually we have considered this assumption that shear stresses are uniformly distributed over the entire width of the section. That assumption is incorrect. If the thickness of the section or the width is larger, then the shear stresses are not uniformly distributed. So that assumption will be correct only if this B value is very small, this B. So why we will discuss it. So shear stresses does not occur in a beam subjected to pure bending. Pure bending within the zone. If the moment on the both sides of the cross section is same, so rate of change of bending moment will be zero, so no shear force will produce. So normally sliding shearing of fiber does not occur in homogeneous material. Homogeneous material means that in steel section actually it is homogeneous, so distribution of crystalline structure is same in all directions. So normally the homogeneous material they are strong in shear. They may fail maybe due to the tensile forces or maybe the shear compressive forces maybe. But in case of the wooden beam, you can see that a wooden beam it is having fiber running only in one direction, maybe along the length. So between the fiber, the shear strength is very small. So if applied shear stresses are more than the strength of interlamination or the strength of or the resistance available between two fiber layers, then the sliding will take place. So sliding of the fiber or the rupture will occur to applied shear stresses. So normally in beam, you know that the shear forces they are maximum at support and the shear stresses they are maximum along the neutral axis. So you can see the split up failure or rupture or the sliding of the fiber at edging on the neutral axis because in wooden beam that is weak in shear. So why it is not being sheared in the center because the center shear force is small. So the tendency of the failure due to the shear stresses will be at edges where the shear force is maximum. So shear flow, the shear stress will be maximum where the V is maximum and Q is maximum. So Q will be maximum static moment of area if A prime is maximum. So A prime partial area is considered always from neutral axis from the extreme fiber to neutral axis. So I is constant. That is the moment of inertia of entire cross section. So more will be Y prime and more will be Y bar or it is depending upon first moment of area of partial area. Okay, now there is a very important concept here. Actually, you might be wondering here, maybe if you thought, actually this V force is the shear force which is acting at this cross section, at any cross section. Because when you determine plotted the shear force diagram, so you assume the cutting section like this, perpendicular to transversal direction. But the shear stresses that you have computed, horizontal shear stresses, they are acting along the horizontal direction or longitudinal direction. So how come it may be possible that the shear force or the shear stresses which is acting in horizontal direction, it should be the function or depending upon shear force which is acting in transversal direction. You might be wondering if you thought, but actually they are interlinked with each other. How? So actually, if we are cutting this layer maybe along neutral axis like this, we assume the cutting section in horizontal direction. So shear stresses, horizontal shear stresses which are acting at the top surface of the bottom part, they may be directed on left side, and with reference to top surface, the shear stresses might be reacting to the right side, because if you are joining, so they will perfectly balance. So if you are considering this or this element, so actually whenever at any point in the cross section it is subjected to horizontal shear stress, the same point is subjected to the vertical shear stresses which are having same magnitude as of this horizontal shear stress, just to balance or maintain the equilibrium. How it is possible? For example, if we take this differential area in rectangular form from here, like this. So on this beam or on this differential area, horizontal shear stresses, they are acting in this direction, and this you have determined by this concept. So if you are taking this element, maybe if I could explain, okay, let me explain by sketching a diagram on the new slide. So we have considered, actually I have sketched here, but I would like to sketch it again for you. For example, you can assume that we have taken this small cross section from here, small area, differential area. So on this top surface of this area, or maybe on this side, you can say that on the top of this surface area, horizontal shear stresses, they are acting on the other side. That I can show by some arrow. So you can say that this is the area. So do you think this element is balanced? No, because this also the cutting surface, this part is also cutting, and this is also continuous. So this element is not balanced. So if this is shear force which is acting on the top surface, so if we want to balance, if you want to apply summation fx is equal to 0, so it means that, so just to balance this element, we must have a force acting on the bottom part of this area but in opposite direction. But again, if do you think this force is balanced? No, because if you want to take the moment about any this point, so both of these forces, they are producing in clockwise, counterclockwise movement. It means that just in order to balance the rotational equilibrium, we must have an equivalent couple acting on the this side also, which is to maintain the equilibrium. Now this element will be in equilibrium. It means that whenever at this point any horizontal force is acting, the same point is also subjected to a vertical shear force or shear stresses which is acting in the perpendicular direction to maintain the equilibrium. So this force and this force will be same. So it means that this force, if it's a shear force, then whatever is this shear force will be same. It means that horizontal shear stresses, they are the function of these forces, which is called the complementary force. So just like I have explained here, I have taken a differential area from here in this side. So if the shear stresses they are acting on the right side with reference to bottom part, so they are acting on this side with reference to top part. So now your question will also be there, why the shear stresses they are acting opposite to each other with reference to top surface and bottom surface. The answer is quite clear. Here is that, for example, the top part is subjected to compressive forces. So compressive forces they are acting toward the cross section F1 and F2. Also they are acting toward the cross section. So if F2 is more than F1, then a resisting force on this bottom surface is acting on this side. Okay, here the bottom part, if we are taking, assume the cutting section from the bottom part, and you just split up the bottom part. So the bottom part is subjected to tensile stresses. So F2 is acting away from here. So F2 will be tensile, acting away, and F1 is also acting to this direction, which is also tensile. So the resisting force F2 minus F1, they should be acting toward this direction. So it means that with reference to bottom part and top part, the direction of horizontal shear force that will be opposite. But if you join, then both will be cancelled out, so the equilibrium will be maintained. So that's why horizontal shear force is acting this way with reference to bottom part, and with reference to top part, they're acting toward this direction. So if we are assuming that that is a horizontal shear force which is acting on this top surface, and we are assuming that the thickness of this area or this cubical element is dz, height is dx, height is dy, and thickness is dx. And then if I can take this plane section only, so this force shear stress acting in z direction, I can represent tau z, which is only acting. We know this is the only force acting. So just to balance this force, an equivalent force must be acting on the bottom surface toward other direction or right side. So I say that this tau z, both these forces, they are producing counterclockwise movement. So just to balance, we must have an opposite couple tau y, which is acting. Direction of tau y should be in such a way that they may produce the clockwise movement. So their magnitude can be determined. So if we want to take the moment of these forces, tau y and tau z, maybe at this corner, this force is passing through this point, so it will create zero moment. This tau y also passing through this point, so it will also create zero moment. So moment produced by this force tau z, this is shear stress, so we need to convert into force. Moment arm tau z will be multiplied with the dy. So we can convert this shear stresses into force, and this force is acting on this area. If we multiply this shear stress with this area, so area is dx into dz. Dx into dz multiplied by tau z will be the force acting in this direction. And the moment arm, because it is producing the moment at this point in counterclockwise direction, so moment arm will be dy. So moment produced by this vertical shear stress can be computed or must be same as of the moment produced by this tau z shear stress. You can convert this tau y into force by multiplying area over which it is acting. Area is dx and dy. And it is producing the moment about this corner, so moment arm is dx. So dx, dz, dy, dx, dz, they will be cancelled on the both sides, which means that tau x and tau y, they are same. So the shear stresses which are acting in horizontal direction will having the same magnitude as of vertical shear stresses. So these stresses, they are called the complementary stresses. So what are the complementary stresses? Whenever horizontal shear stresses, they are acting at any point in the cross section, the same point is subjected to vertical shear stresses which is having the same magnitude, which is referred as a complementary. So both will produce simultaneously. So what is the definition? The horizontal shear stress at any point is always accompanied by an equal vertical shear stresses and are termed as a complementary stress. They are maintaining the rotational equilibrium. So it is concluded that when a beam is subjected to transversal loading, both horizontal and vertical shearing stresses numerically equal in magnitude arise in the beam. The vertical shear stresses are of such magnitude that their resultant at any cross section is exactly equal to total shear force at the same section. He says that if you know the total shear stresses they are acting along the cross section, if you multiply the shear stresses with the cross section, so that will be equal to shear force which is acting at any cross section that you are using in this formula. Okay, next, if we want to determine the maximum shear stresses, so the shear stress will be maximum along neutral axis. We know that. So we want to derive a general expression first. For example, we want to determine a shear stresses at the bottom of this partial area or at this layer. And this partial area is A prime. So depth of the section is H. H by 2 is the distance from neutral axis to extreme fiber. Because load is acting downward, so movement is produced about this x-axis. Y is the distance from the neutral axis to the bottom of the layer, and y bar is the partial area, centroid of the partial area from neutral axis, and b is the width of the cross section. So if we want to determine the shear stress at the bottom of this area layer, so by using this formula, V over IB into static moment of area or partial area into the centroid of the partial area. This area is equal to B is constant, H by 2 minus Y bar. H by 2 minus Y bar multiply B, that is this area A prime. So now Y bar is the centroidal location or distance from the centroid of partial area to the neutral axis. So that will be equal to this Y. In this Y, if we add up half of this distance, so Y plus this thickness is H by 2 minus Y. And if we're taking the half, then we will have distance from this to bottom layer. So Y plus H by 2 minus Y, half of this value is Y bar. After simplification, opening up the bracket, we are having this expression. So shear stresses, they are directly proportional to the V. So at any cross section, shear force is constant, moment of inertia is constant, H is constant, so Y is variable. It means that what is Y? Y is the distance along the neutral axis, along the depth with reference to neutral axis. So Y is second degree. So it means that Y is the second degree variable. It means that shear stresses, they are second degree function of Y value. So we know that if Y is second degree, that is the equation of parabola. So it means that the shear stresses, they vary parabolically with the increase or decrease of Y value. What is increase or decrease of Y value? Distance of any layer with reference to neutral axis. So shear stresses, if the Y value equal to H by 2, if you are producing, if you want to compute the shear stresses at the top, point, top layer, maybe outside the layer. So y will be equal to h by 2. Square of h by 2 will be h square by 4, so this term will be cancelled. So that is a proof that shear stresses at extreme fiber, they are zero, because no partial area exists on the top side. And with reference to bottom surface, no partial area exists at the bottom side. So A prime is the partial area on either side of the layer. If you want to compute shear stresses at this layer, so A area may be above the layer or bottom side of the layer. Answer will be same. So if we want to compute maximum stresses, then we need to substitute this y value equal to 0. So when y will be 0, it will be 0 along neutral axis. So y is 0 along neutral axis. When we are substituting this y value equal to 0, so that will become h square by 4. And moment of inertia is bh cube divided by 12. And after simplification, so I have written directly, but I am not supposed to write directly. So you will find that this area, this answer is coming as a B into H, because H can be cancelled with this. So BH is the cross section area, and we are having 3 by 2. 12 will go on the top side, so when it will be cancelled with this 2, so we'll have the answer 3 by 2, because it is also supposed to cancel with here. So actually this answer is supposed to be 8, because 4 will be multiplied with 2. Okay, here very important aspect. So it means that tau maximum shear stresses which are produced along neutral axis are 3 by 2 of V over A. So what is 3 by 2? That is 1.5. So you know that by Newton's third law, reaction must be equal to action. So this tau is resisting shear force, shear stresses, and V over A, these are applied shear stresses. And this equation states that resisting shear stresses, they are 1.5 times of applied shear stresses. They are 50% more than applied shear. How come this is it possible? This cannot be possible. Reaction cannot be more than action. It means that there is some mistake in the calculation. Actually, there is no mistake in the calculation, because this equation is based upon assumption that shear stresses, they are uniformly distributed over the entire cross section of the area. So anyhow, because this force will determine the shear stresses, so shear stresses, they are given on conservative side or higher side, so we can use in calculation. But actually this could not be possible. Tau should be equal to V over A. So I will discuss in detail in my next lecture. So this slide is the last lecture today. So why we are having the maximum shear stresses 50% more than V over A? I usually ask this question in the examination, in the quizzes, and also in the viva. So I will explain in my next lecture. But anyhow, if we want to plot the distribution of shear stresses along thickness, along depth, so they are zero at thin fiber. So when we are moving toward neutral axis, so they will be maximum at the neutral axis, and they are varying parabolically. Why parabolically? Because with the decrease of the increase or decrease of the y, so y is more will be y, so less will be the stresses. So if y is 0, stresses are maximum. So y is second degree function, so shear stress is the second degree function of the y value, so distribution is parabolic. Here you can see the shear failure or the sliding of top and bottom surface along neutral axis in the beam along the neutral surface. Here you can see in wooden, because wooden beam, they are weak in shear. they are strong in compression and tension. So there will be no rupture in tension side or compression side, so they will fail due to the shear stresses. So I will stop here. So next time we will discuss the limitation of the shear formula, and we will discuss that why the this formula gives the wrong answer.
एक्सक्यूज मी सर।
Yes.
सर वो एक स्टूडेंट है 17 सेशन से, वो कह रहा था कि